everyone, Alexa Dunn here, and today I am going to be talking about character agency and growth. This is kind of a 201 character topic. I do have a video on character development, which covers the basics of creating characters who are layered and complex, interact with the world in dynamic ways, but the next level with your characters and writing your story is making sure that your characters have wants, needs, and that they grow and change over the course of the story. Because there's no point in a story unless things happen and people change. You don't want things to feel stagnant or passive because you're going to lose your readers. They're going to have a less satisfying emotional reading experience if you don't give them both the character who they can relate to, who has agency in their own story, and who actually grows and changes. Specifically with agency, you want to be sure that your character is making active choices in the story to propel things forward. This is so that the reading experience feels less passive, it feels less like things just happen to and around your main character, and in particular, if you are writing a female main character, it is especially important to give them agency just because there is this long tradition of subconsciously taking agency from women in stories. Like even the greatest feminists do this in their work. I've done it in first drafts and had to fix it because we're so accustomed to in our media, because it's in all of our media, having people make decisions for our female heroines, for things, bad things happening, and then they are forced to do something. So it's important just to always kind of consider, does your female character specifically have enough agency in the story? But let's hone in on character growth first. Personally, I believe that the point of story is character. Deep, interesting, complex characters and the journeys they go on and the changes they go through. There are, of course, plenty of readers who are more of plot-based readers, but I'm a character girl. Your character should go on a journey in your book, whether it's metaphorical or literal. Your character should have a starting point, a middle point, which is where change is actually happening, and then an end, where you see the character making new decisions and choices that show the change and show that they are a different person. This is going to go hand in hand with what your character wants, as well as what they need. Every good character wants something. They need to have something they want. This is the core of your conflict and your stakes, because you're going to need to be thinking about, okay, what do they want? What is standing in their way? And what are the consequences if they don't get it? That is basic conflict and stakes. These conflict and stakes are always going to be better if they are rooted specifically in character, because there's what a character wants, what they know they want, and what they think they want, but then there's also what a character needs. This isn't always going to be obvious to you as the author at first, and certainly not always to the character, but you can actually come up with really interesting conflict and growth through what the character actually needs, because very often what they need is going to be in conflict with what they want or think they want. When you're thinking about what a character wants, think both concrete and intangible. It's completely okay to give them something literal and concrete that they want. They want someone to love them. They want to save someone. They want to find an object. They want glory, and that's usually attached to something concrete. But you can also think about the intangible ones. One of my favorite examples of this is in Harry Potter. Harry's very clear intangible want, which was also his need, was family. To create family, to find family. And this really, when you think about it, fueled the entire Harry Potter series. Now, when J.K. Rowling set out to write it, did she know that that was Harry's need and that was going to fuel all of the kind of growth and change over the series? I don't know. And so here I am giving you permission. As you are writing and developing characters and you're thinking about character growth and you're thinking about character agency, you don't necessarily have to know what their secret need is when you start out. You might know when you start out, but many of us actually discover this as we're writing. We discover the thing that actually is going to produce the most interesting growth in our character, and then, we torture them on the page and we get them where they need to be. So let's talk about how you actually write character growth. It's not easy. Like, even trying to explain this to you, I'm like, you just kind of figure it out. So you think about what the character wants, and as you're throwing conflict in their way, which you need to do for plot, think about how your character is going to respond to these challenges, to the thing that they want. What are their key character traits? And as you're developing your characters, you will come up with these traits. So it's stubbornness or ruthlessness or sensitivity, whatever it is. Think about these things and have them react to these obstacles and challenges in that way. But also think about things that need to happen to these characters, things they need to witness, or conversations they need to have. Foils. You can actually use the other characters in the story, and should use the other characters in the story, as foils to your main characters. And it's through interactions with these other characters, the things through which you will put them, that the character will learn things. Now, it's not literally the character learning fun lessons on the page, like, wow, I'm so glad I learned that. You as an author, you have to have kind of a deft hand. It's walking your character through all these scenarios in a book. The big ones are going to change them where the change starts to happen. It is going to fall in Act 2, which is the middle, which is also the hardest part of the book to write. None of this is easy, but it's kind of having them experience things and react to them in one way in the beginning, and then you want to throw something similar their way later and have them react differently. Or you have different consequences. This is another way to kind of make change happen. Have the character do something earlier on or react in a specific way to an obstacle, and later, when they do the same thing, there is an unexpected consequence or a reversal that is going to force the character to think about everything and change. So for example, in many books, this kind of challenge and reversal that forces change is that they lose something. For example, it can be they lose the thing they thought they wanted. It could be that one of those character foils calls them on their bullshit, losing a friendship, losing a love interest, people dying. There are all sorts of consequences that can come that are going to force change in that character. There tends to be a really interesting point in the book, and it's around the shift into the third act, or in the third act, where your character is actually going to get what they want. They're going to get what they thought they wanted. And this is where that need is going to come in, because where you can force the change and show the change is through the secret or subconscious need, what the character actually needs. And this typically comes in the form of that character then throwing away the thing that they wanted, that they thought they wanted, but didn't actually give them what they needed. And so you're having your character actively make a choice, do something to show that growth. They're throwing away the thing they wanted to get the thing they need, or just to do the right thing. And this all ties into agency. But first, I just want to give you a common example that pops up in YA a lot, or really anything that kind of has the found family trope. Really common example of this is the main character, the hero, they get what they want, which is the crown or the glory or whatever it is, but then they realize their friends are in danger, or their actions have the consequence with friendship or found family, and what they really need to do is throw away the thing to save their newfound friends, and what they really needed was community. This is a really common trope example, but it's one that definitely works that readers tend to connect to. So just to kind of give you kind of an idea of that, I've seen that trope in a lot of YA, for example. And of course, the very obvious character growth arc there is the loner who learns to trust people and rely on friends and found family and enjoy community. We accomplish more together than we do apart, so that's a good example. And just because I do like to make it complicated, you shouldn't just be thinking about the character growth of your main character, though that is the most important character to ensure they have growth and change. But you can also think about key side characters who are going to grow and change over the course of the story. Now, every character can't grow and change over the course of the story. Good news, little less work, because you do need constants to kind of exist in the story for your main character to play off of. You need a couple stalwart characters who aren't going to go anywhere. But it can actually make your main character's change a lot more dynamic and interesting, or it can be the catalyst for your main character's change if you have some key interesting side characters change as well. Most often this is going to be your love interest or say a friend character or a family character. Having someone, particularly who the main character thought of as one thing, demonstrate change can often give that main character the kick in the pants to reevaluate themselves as well. So definitely think about your side characters, critical side characters, and or love interests and what they are doing in the story as well. What is their start point, change, and then end point as well? Just to offer a personal example, in The Stars We Steal, which is my next book, I do this with the main character's sister. She has a change arc as well, where she just becomes a more thoughtful and mature character, and seeing her sister's change kicks the main character in the butt a bit about certain things. I also have her love interest experiencing some change, which just keeps their dynamics fresh and changing throughout the book. So now let's talk about character agency. So character agency is about ensuring that your main character is actively making choices that drive the story, that drive the plot forward, rather than just a series of things happening to them. When things happen to them and your character is only ever reacting, it's going to lead to a more passive reading experience. This is usually something self-conscious that the reader can't quite place their finger on. Often if you hear a note, oh, I couldn't quite connect to the main character, or they didn't feel as invested as they wanted to, very often agency is the problem. Now I know what you're thinking or asking. I've struggled with this as well, but some people are just passive. There is such thing as passive human beings, so why can't you have passive characters? I don't disagree with you. I think you can write passive characters. You just have to be careful about it, and also this can be an opportunity to show character growth. Maybe someone's passive for the majority of a story, but part of their change is actively taking steps and making decisions later. Or sometimes you just have to make them a little less passive. I had to make both of my main characters and my two retellings less passive. Traditionally and famously, they were just more passive characters, but YA in particular, which is my category, most YA main characters aren't passive. They are actively making decisions and taking steps that drive their stories forward, and that is something that modern teenagers really relate to. They are the heroes of their own stories. So I had to make Jane Eyre and Anne Elliot more passive than they were in the source material, which particularly transformed persuasion. It's why I call The Stars We Steal more of a Jane Austen meets The Bachelor story rather than a strict persuasion retelling, because let me tell you, when you give Anne Elliot agency, it changes the story. Now, of course, in any story, things are going to happen to your character. Most often, the inciting incident is something that happens to your character, and then they have to make decisions based off of that. And that's the key thing. Balance. You want to make sure at enough places in your story, things happen as a direct result of decisions your character made, and not decisions they were forced to make. Agency is a very fine line. Now, sometimes you want to have things happen to your character and it is a legitimate story choice, but try to give your character micro agency within that story. So something terrible has happened to them and they're doing something that they don't want to do. What small lines in the sand can they draw? Another aspect of agency does lie in that character want. It's making sure your character actively wants something. It's giving them an ambition or a hobby, a specific goal that they can take concrete steps towards. A great example of a story that on many levels lacked agency that has been called out a lot for this is Twilight. This is not me shitting on Twilight, but pointing out that Bella generally doesn't have agency. Generally, things happen to Bella until Bella decides she wants to be a vampire. Twilight is not my favorite series, but I actually completely understand the argument that many fans make that Bella did develop agency because that was an active choice she made of something she wanted, and she took the steps she needed to get what she wanted. Twilight, of course, is kind of a flawed work, but I think it was a really common reaction to Twilight, to the first book. I certainly experienced this, that Bella felt like a very passive character. So that's just to give you an idea of, oh, that's what a character without agency can look like. Something I've really had to watch for working on my own characters to give them more agency, because I'll tell you, It is subconscious to have bad things happen to your characters and have them react to it. It's not easy to default to agency for everyone. So a place where I typically have kind of narrowed in, there are going to be critical decision points in any given story. These are going to be around like midpoint turns and break into threes. And I am always mindful of, especially with a love interest, if I have a love interest, finding out an essential bit of information or making a suggestion, I then will rework my plot, whatever my initial idea was, to shift it so that that main character gets to discover something and think of something and make a decision. It's little tweaks along the way. Yes, it can kind of have ripples and change your story a bit, but really any opportunity you can find to give your character more agency is good. Generally, you just want to watch out for situations in your book where it's other people coming up with ideas, it's other people discovering critical information, it's other characters convincing your main character to do something. If you have a lot of that, that's where you want to look to make changes so that more of kind of that decision making lies in the hands of your main character. And the reason you want them to have this agency is that the agency ties into growth. If your character is making these critical decisions, if it's their kind of thread of figuring something out, having an emotional or even logical reaction to it, and then making a choice, the consequences of those choices are what lead to real and satisfying character growth. Whereas if it's all reactionary, if you have a passive character and things happen to them, and the things that they do that have terrible consequences were out of their control, you're either not going to have any character growth, or the character growth isn't going to feel earned, it's going to feel shallow. Essentially, character agency is how you earn your character growth. So that's kind of an overview of character growth and kind of the nuts and bolts of it, why it's important, character agency, and some of my thoughts on the matter. I feel like there's so much more to both of these topics, and I would love to discuss them in the comments. Let me know if you have questions, things that you think and know about character growth and agency, because I feel like I'm still learning and growing in this area, and you don't always nail it on your first draft. Really strong character growth and agency can very often come in revision. Generally because I do feel that characters are the heart and soul of books, for me, at least as a writer and as a reader. Character development and complexity and growth involves a lot of work. It's not easy, and if you find it challenging, you're not alone. Just do the best you can. Think about some of these things as you're writing, as you're revising. And when you give your book to other people to read, ask them. Ask them how they feel about the characters. Are there places where they were frustrated? If so, why? And you can kind of start to pick apart, do you have a passivity problem? Is the want not clear enough? Do you not have a secret need? Are you not doing reversals to show growth? Lots of ways to kind of interrogate character problems in your novel. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will come up with some more 201 intense discussion topics for writing. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, guys, happy writing.